Good evening. The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council for September the 10th, 2019 is now in session. Before I ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence, I want to take a minute to share a few other things with you. First, I want to welcome Mr. Wes Haskett, our interim town manager, to his first meeting in that role. I think going into a new job, even without a hurricane, would be a challenge, but Wes has handled it extremely well, and I thank him. On another note, I want to take just a few minutes to thank all those who helped clear our streets of limbs, trees, and debris to allow emergency vehicle access. To our fire department, volunteers, our policemen, to members of our town staff, our chipping service, contractor, our residents, and others, including some members of the Coast Guard, who helped us so capably and willingly. My sincere thanks. There are always comparisons made between this storm and others we have experienced. I hear this, and most of you do. Oh, it was much worse during Isabel than it was during this storm. But I have to say that while we were spared the flooding that so often accompanies these events, we did see what I believe to be the greatest number of trees down in many parts of our town, not just on the right-of-way, but also in people's yards. I'm sure Wes will be discussing later with us what the protocol and the schedule will be, hopefully, for cleanup. This time I'd ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would. Thank you. I would ask that you keep those people in Hatteras and Frisco and Ocracoke in your prayers. They've been hit really hard south of us, much more devastation than we experienced from this storm. So please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you. Council, are there any amendments to the agenda? If not, I ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Do I have a second?
I will.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have an agenda. At this time, I'd ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda, Council. It's tab 1 in your meeting book.
I'll so move.
Thank you, Jim. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any discussion about the consent agenda? If not, I'd ask for a motion. I'd ask for a vote in favor of accepting it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Consent agenda has now been passed. This time, I'd like to recognize employees for their years of service. If Bonnie Swain and Jennifer Couture and David Cole would join me in the front, I'll meet you down there.
I'd like to introduce the newest addition to the Southern Shores Police Department, Officer Chris Simpson. Could you come up here, Chris? Might as well break it in right. Just a little bit of background on Chris. Chris was born and raised in Kill Devil Hills. Graduated First Flight High School, 2006. Holy crap. Wow. Worked as a contractor for the phone company for several years. He was a graduate of the Basic Law Enforcement Training Academy in September of 2014. He worked with the Kitty Hawk Police Department from September 2014 till July of 2019, until that point, and then we hired him. He enjoys working around the yard, probably a lot after last week, huh? Carpentry work, and occasionally riding his motorcycle. What I can tell you is that Chris came to the top when we were doing interviews. He's an exceptional police officer. He has a great attitude, and he's definitely a big asset to the town of Southern Shores, and we're very fortunate to have him, so I welcome him. Thank you, Chris. You're awesome.
Welcome aboard, Chris. This time I'll call on our interim town manager, Wes Haskett, for staff report.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I have my first of two reports for y'all tonight. I'm going to give one now for planning, then I'll give another one under town manager's report. For the month of August, for permitting, we had 13 zoning permits issued, 37 building permits issued. Those consisted of 3 single-family dwellings, 4 additions, 4 remodels, 6 repairs, 2 accessories, and 18 others. There are currently 17 single-family dwellings under construction in the town, and the total amount of fees we collected in August was $15,948.70. With respect to the town planning board, they will be meeting on September 16th, and the board will continue its discussion of the town's current requirements for building height and fill. Any questions?
Any questions, council? Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
This time I'll call on our police chief for his report. Good evening, David, again.
The monthly report for the August of 2019. As you can see, we had 1,257 calls for service. Under the incidents, which were actual crimes that were reported, you can see we had 24. 2 of those were assaults, 2 breaking and entering, 1 larceny, 1 fraud call, a vandalism. We had 6 that were drug related. We had 3 DWIs, excuse me. 1 was a civil serve papers, 4 traffic incidents, 1 that involved found property, 2 disputes, for a total of 24. Under the criminal arrest, we made 2 arrests for the assault, 6 for the drugs, 3 for the driving while intoxicated, and 3 that were traffic related, along with the serve paper, for a total of 15 arrests. We had 12 reportable motor vehicle accidents for the month of August. Officers stopped 112 vehicles. Out of that, they wrote 54 written citations and another 73 warning citations. None of the ordinance violations, there were a total of 82. The only other thing I would like to add is regarding the storm. All of the officers hunkered down at the police department. We were out handling numerous calls until the weather. Normally, if it gets over 50 miles an hour, that's when we hunker down, unless it's a life-threatening emergency. And then afterwards, obviously, we responded to a lot of trees down, other types of things. I commend the fire department as well as Public Works, and Wes did a heck of a job, especially being thrown into something like this so quick. And it was a pleasure to work beside all of them. And with that, Any questions? Thank you for your time. Thank you.
I would second your comments, David. It's a real honor to work with them. Thank you. Ed Limbacher, our fire chief. Good evening, Ed.
Good evening, everybody. For the month of August, the fire department responded to 7 structure fires, 1 grass or brush fire, 49 medical calls, 2 motor vehicle accidents, 3 surf rescues, 1 hazardous condition, 4 LP or natural gas leaks, 4 service calls, 1 lockout, 1 assist the police or government agency, 4 public service, 1 dispatch canceling en route, 1 smoke or odor of smoke, 10 alarms, and 8 lightning strikes, for a total of 97 for August. Anybody have any questions on that?
How does that compare with a normal month or any other?
Last year we were at 74, so again, picking way up this month. Hopefully it's going to start dropping off after the hurricanes are all over here, but, so, yep. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Ed.
I'd just like to echo the chief's comments about the hurricane. I thought we all worked phenomenally together. And again, my personal thanks is to Wes for getting the road department involved with the tractors, helping clear the trees. It was a phenomenal idea, and I thought it was worked out very well. We also had the Coast Guard here with some of my ties for EOC, and having 8 fresh guys show up at 4:30 was real nice. So we'll be sending some donuts down their way, but
Well
I
done.
appreciated it.
Well done.
Yep, thank you.
Town manager's report.
Thank you again,
Mr.
Mr.
Hassler.
Mayor, members of council. First, I'll just provide you with a brief update on Hurricane Dorian. The town fared pretty well compared to what happened further south in Hatteras and Ocracoke, and our thoughts are with them as they recover. We reported a total of 14 damaged structures to Dare County, but the biggest issue was and still is vegetative debris. Cleanup of the town streets to make them passable began as soon as weather conditions allowed on September 6th, and when the storm passed by. I'd like to thank our Public Works Department, our Police Department, Southern Shores Volunteer Fire Department, U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Forestry Service, and local tree contractors for their quick and orderly clearing of the town streets. I've been notified by our local tree contractor that the amount of debris, vegetative debris, generated by Dorian is more than he can handle. As a result, I've contacted the debris removal contractor and debris removal monitoring contractor that are established in the interlocal county agreement with Dare County, and both are ready to assist us. At this point, we're waiting on a cost estimate and to see if this event will be declared and eligible for FEMA assistance. There are also many properties that still have debris that hasn't been taken out to the right-of-way for pickup, and we want to make sure that that as much debris as possible is picked up, because we're only planning for 1 debris pickup, 1 pass through the town. If this event is declared and eligible for FEMA assistance, there may be restrictions on picking up debris from private streets, which has occurred as a result of previous storms. With that being said, another special announcement newsletter, similar to one that was sent out yesterday afternoon, will be sent out, as well as posted on town's social media, with a storm-generated debris pickup schedule and protocols as soon as possible. I'm hoping that we might be able to provide this information by the end of the week. So everyone, please stand by on that. Next, I'll just touch on Capitol Street projects. We're still waiting on the geotechnical reports for the East Dogwood Trail and Hillcrest Trail street projects. Hillcrest Drive, excuse me. We'll continue to provide updates as those projects move forward. And then lastly, I'll touch on the South Dogwood Trail walking path. The bid opening for the South Dogwood Trail walking path has been postponed until October 3rd at 10 a.m. The reason for this change in schedule is so that we can use the additional time during the extended bid period to have a small number of path sections evaluated for Americans with Disabilities Act standards compliance prior to opening the bids. As a result of this postponement, your consideration of awarding a contract for this project was removed from tonight's meeting agenda and has been added to the November 6th council meeting agenda. That concludes my report, Mr. Mayor, council members. If y'all have any questions, I can try to answer those for you.
Thank you, Wes. Anybody have questions for Wes? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all.
Our town attorney?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but I don't have anything to report tonight.
Thank you, Ben. Committee reports, Exploratory Committee for Potential Branch Library, Chairman Mike Fletcher. Good evening, Mike.
As many of you know, we were requested a couple of months ago to explore the possibility of a branch library here in Southern Shores. We formed a committee as a request. We have, I think, about 8 members, including non-voting members, which includes Mr. Connors and Mayor Kitty. We have done several things and actually, I think, made considerable progress in the first couple of months. We've made, we had a property suitability. In other words, we went out and looked for properties that might be appropriate for a branch library, and I think we examined like 4 or 5, and we found one that was very promising. I'm not going to talk about the details yet because none of that's been finalized. But we're in the process of figuring out how much it's going to cost, so on and so forth, how it could be, and so on and so forth. We also had a briefing from Mr. Warwick, who's the East Albemarle Regional Library System Director. He gave us a rundown on essentially everything the library does, all its services, and so on and so forth, what we could expect, as well as his wisdom from in regards to how libraries operate and so on and so forth. We were supposed to have last Friday, but it was postponed until this Friday, a meeting to generate a survey, which we're going to put to the surrounding communities regarding their use of the library and their potential use of a branch library here, similar to the one that we did for the East Dogwood Trail, using the same SurveyMonkey protocol that we used for that survey. We also, the account's been set up, it's all ready to go. We just have to get the questions finalized, which we hope to do in the next week or 2. We should also have another meeting to get more information on the site suitability and essentially doing a lot of costing of, because this is a Dare County initiative for the most part, as far as who's going to pay for it, right? If it should come to pass. So we have to actually have numbers and things like that, which we're going to get together to essentially have a proposal ready to forward to you folks to pass on. I'd like to be very optimistic and say that we're going to try to get this done in the next few months, rather than let it drag on, because I think it's a grand idea myself, otherwise I wouldn't have accepted the chairmanship, and I think it would be a great addition to the community if it happens. So again, I think we're making pretty good progress on the committee and hope to get a lot of things done in the next couple of months. Yeah, any questions?
Any questions for Mike?
I'd like to just throw out a comment. That is, I guess it was the second meeting that we held. I was stunned at how much work had been done by some of the individuals on that committee. They have taken that bull and run with it. They just about run that bull to death. They've done a great job. So I'll tell them that personally. But please relay that if I miss a meeting.
Well, thanks, Jim. I was amazed myself that we come to the meeting and the 3 pages of detailed numbers and things like that were laid out. I was quite impressed. So yeah, again, I'm very positive. I think we're making good progress. Any other comments or questions?
No, just thanks.
All right.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate your report and appreciate what you're doing. This time, I'll open public comment. First person signed up to speak is Michael Tillett. Good evening, Michael.
Good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing? First off, I'd like to thank y'all for letting me come up here and be before you guys. And I wanted to make a presentation to Chief David because they've done an awesome job on our OBX Riding Custom Festival back in May. and I'm up here representing the Garage Band Charities that put on this event. And could I get Mr. David to come up? On behalf of the OBX Ride and Custom Festival and Garage Band Charities, I just want to thank you guys for having us out with the OBX Ride and Custom Festival car cruise. We got together, for anybody that didn't know, we got together in Kitty Hawk and we went all the way down to Nags Head, and these guys made it very easy coming from Kitty Hawk, Southern Shore intersection. You get on Highway 12, put that and got out you. And y'all guys made this truly good. Because everybody that I've talked to, we go all around the country doing these things, and they were very impressed with what you did.
We appreciate it, standing very functional, it's pretty common, too.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank y'all once again for having me up. Looking forward to 2020. And before I go, we've already booked up one hotel and working on another one right now for 2020. Got some rooms booked in the Hilton here. So I just appreciate all y'all's help also. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person signed up to speak is Matt Neal. Good evening, Matt.
Good evening, Council. Matt Neal, 163 Wax Myrtle Trail. General public comment, I want to express appreciation for Public Works, Police Department, Fire Department. We're really proud to be a member of this town after our cleanup with the Hurricane Dorian. It was pretty impressive. I was listening to VHF radio on reports from some of the other townships during the storm, and we recovered very quickly, and I was able to get to my dad's house very quickly, even though the road was littered with trees. And again, it was just made you proud to be a member of Dare County and specifically the town of Southern Shore. So thank you all for all your efforts. I want to pivot. Some of my comments were sort of on the hinge of the public hearing tonight, but specifically I wanted to talk about the second ordinance that might be discussed that addresses the tear down of structure and the forced recombination at that point. I think the path the planning board originally took with the first ordinance, in my opinion, might be your best and most direct route forward to resolve this issue. The tear down, the challenge that I see with it is that it really excludes vacant lots. So potentially, like my lot, when I purchased 163 Wax Myrtle Trail, was two 50-foot lots. There was no structure on it. So under that ordinance, I would have been able to build two houses on each lot with 12-foot setbacks and whatnot. There are quite a few vacant lots still out there that are comprised of two different parcels. And I think it's sort of a large, it's going to get us back to square one. You're going to be talking about it again. So, I mean, I would focus all attention on the public hearing and what the planning board has done and recommended to you tonight. And as you focus that attention, I've said it before, please do not forget Chip, Mr. Burden, because he is the one exemption that we certainly know about that is not written into this. And if you do vote on this tonight, which I certainly hope that you do, please instruct something to be written for him that the planning board can review forthrightly. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. This time I'll close public comment. And item 6 is old business, a public hearing and council discussion and our action to consider planning board recommendation ZTA 1809 PB01. I'll turn it over to our town attorney, Mr. Ben Gallup.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a legislative public hearing to consider zoning text amendment ZTA 18-09 PB01. If we could keep the door open, that would be great. Yes, we need to keep it open, but if I'm speaking into the microphone, is that better? Okay. We need to keep the door open, but that will mean that the folks outside might want to keep it down a little bit so that everyone can hear in the room. This is a legislative public hearing on the zoning text amendment, ZTA 18-09 PB01. Legislative means you will not be sworn. If you signed up to speak, you'll have an opportunity to speak. If you, after that, I'll ask for people to raise their hands. If anyone else would like to speak, we're not going to do any double ups. You're going to get one shot. I will ask the planning board chair to give a brief introduction if she would like to, and Mr. Haskett will give the initial introduction once I open the public hearing, then we'll go to the public. So I'll open the public hearing now, and Mr. Haskett.
Thank you, Ben. Council, the next item on your agenda is ZTA-1809 PB01. The applicant is the Town of Southern Shores, and the requested action is to amend Section 36-132, Regulation of Structures and Uses Nonconforming. As requested by council at the February 5th, 2019 Town Council meeting, town staff identified the nonconforming lots in the town and presented its findings to the Planning Board at the April 23rd, 2019 Special Planning Board meeting, and to the Town Council at the May 7, 2019 Town Council meeting. Also at the April 23rd, 2019 Special Planning Board meeting, the board asked town staff to draft a ZTA that includes all of the situations previously identified in ZTA-1809 PB, with the addition of a situation where a lot is less than 100 feet wide, but greater than 20,000 square feet, that is adjacent to a conforming lot with a single-family dwelling, and a situation where 3 adjacent 50-foot lots are under the same familiar ownership when the deed was recorded prior to September 5th, 2018. So those two were added. ZTA-1809 PB01 is an attempt to address all the nonconforming situations that have been identified by town staff and the Town Planning Board up until around January. Mr. Burden's situation has come up as well. With respect to the town's land use plan, we have determined that it does apply to Policy 2. Town staff and the Town Planning Board have determined that the amendments are consistent with the town's adopted land use plan, and the Planning Board unanimously recommended approval of 1809 PB01 at the June 17, 2019 Planning Board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Haskett.
Yes, sir.
Does anybody on the board have any questions for Mr. Haskett? Ms. Morey, would you like to say anything?
Good evening, Mayor Bennett and council members. I'll try to make this brief. The issue of nonconforming lots, as I've said previously, is a complicated issue. What we were trying to do, I think, originally was regulate density. That's really what this is all about. And when we started on trying to do this, one of the first drafts that we looked at is very similar to the one that's in your packet tonight, that Mr. Connors requested our town attorney to present to y'all. We did have a robust discussion about that, and it was determined that that was not going to solve the problem that we intended to solve. So that's why the Planning Board unanimously decided to not adopt that particular zoning text amendment. We then went to essentially trying to determine which lots we wanted to find exceptions to the previously established 07, which slammed the door on what we wanted to slam the door on, which was too many small lots being developed. So we came up with our, we thought, very targeted list of exceptions, and that's what's before you tonight. If we determine that there are other properties that are exceptions that we need to address, we can adopt additional zoning text amendments. And I would definitely agree with what Matt Neal said in terms of the way to approach this problem, to try to give back to property owners who have been adversely affected by what we did with 07, is to pass what's before you tonight. And if we find other exceptions, we will handle them as they occur. I do not think that what you have before you tonight is something that's full of loopholes. I don't think it was written that way. It was written specifically to address conditions that we were aware of at the time. Is that substantially what? Okay. So that's what, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer, but that's what I got for you.
Any questions for Elizabeth? I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead, Mr. Mayor. Does anyone have any questions for Elizabeth?
Not for her, but for you. Or should I wait?
I'll have a go, I guess, right after Elizabeth gets down.
Okay.
So that the public can comment on whatever I have to say. Anyone else have any questions? Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So I'll start with your question for me.
Well, we've had two members or two people reference a particular issue that's not covered under here. Can we add that in to say that if this is passed, to cover that piece of property or issues like that piece of property?
I think that that opens you up to a risk of voiding the amendment as being a substantial change that didn't go through the planning board process to come to this board. So I would not recommend doing that. I would recommend, as Mr. Neal and Ms. Morey have mentioned, and I'm not sure if Wes went all the way there when he brought it up, Mr. Burton's thing, but the process would be better served by going through the whole process. It would limit the potential risk of a challenge that voided the amendment. Any more questions? And actually, what I had to say, Ms. Morey covered pretty well. The biggest question is going to be, what policy is the policy you want to have? The consideration of PB01 that's in front of you is a policy of having a very tight restriction on the development of non-conforming lots, except for a number of exceptions that you feel were unnecessarily caught in the tight restriction. And then the consideration of Mr. Connor's proposal that we're going to talk about later, to balance it and to understand the differences, is that it would be more of a policy of just dealing with tear downs and rebuilds that cross lot lines. And what's important to remember that I think gets lost in the numerous times that we've talked about this situation is that there were restrictions greater than that before we started having these discussions. They just had the loopholes that we attempted to close with 07 when we modified section 36-132 this time last year. But it's important to remember that there were restrictions, and there were attempted restrictions that were very close to what we did in September of last year. The language was a little loose and left open some holes that didn't need to be there. So just keep that in mind when you're considering how you want to deal with the one that's in front of you and the consideration of later ones. It can certainly be your policy either way to go whichever way you'd like to go, but I want to make sure that you know where you're looking at the differences in the two. So if anybody has any more questions for me, I'll be glad to take them, but other than that, I'm going to call on Mr. Sharp to come up.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
The scenario that Matt Neal provided during the public comment period, that's not covered by the ZTA, is it? Or is it?
The Mr. Burden scenario?
No, I'm talking about his own experience. He had a 100-foot lot that was basically two 50-foot lots. So theoretically, he could have built two houses, one on each 50-foot lot. And his was not a tear down, it was a vacant lot. So does that mean, is that covered in this ZTA? Based on what I'm understanding, it's just for tear downs.
My understanding is Matt was talking about the second write-up.
Yeah, that's the second one. So the one that's in front of you now is the exceptions to the current policy,
Okay,
the
but they're
list
all
of
under the
exceptions.
same ZTA though, right?
Well, yes,
Okay, that's why I asked
all the
question.
exceptions are there under the same ZTA. So is the question whether or not he would have been able to build on both of those vacant lots?
Yeah.
And I don't believe that he would have been.
So
'cause
then going back to Gary's question and your answer, we would have to go through the planning board ZTA process again to cover the exception that Matt Neal explained. Is that correct?
Can we let him talk?
Yeah, and actually, he might Yeah, the easiest way to deal with scenarios is you got to have all the facts, and you got to step through and look at each one. It's kind of like a kid's game where you put everything in and you move them around until they find the hole that they
Okay,
come out of.
let's approach it another way. Disregard what he said. I'll give you the scenario. You've got a 100-foot lot.
All right?
It's vacant, no house has ever been on it, and someone buys it and say, hey, I've got two 50-foot lots, together they make 100 feet, can I build a house on each 50-foot lot? That's the question.
Well, the exception for I would say would not apply because either lot is under the same ownership as an adjacent lot. Doesn't sound like the lot, I'm assuming that they don't meet the area requirement, that they're not a lot that meets the 20,000 square feet.
They could or could not.
Well, then that would make a difference because number
Okay,
two.
suppose they do meet the area requirement.
Okay, so under 2, if the lot meets or exceeds the lot area requirements from the district and is located adjacent to a single non-conforming lot or a single conforming lot under the same ownership on which is located an existing family dwelling, then you have an exception. So in this case, that wouldn't apply either because you don't have a conforming lot next door. You've got another non-conforming lot, and it doesn't have a dwelling on top of it. So then if you step down to 3, the lot is one of 3 or less adjacent non-conforming lots under ownership of related siblings on September 5, 2018. That's not the case. Then you go to 4, the lot is located adjacent to land under the same ownership. Okay, that qualifies, on which is located an existing single-family dwelling. Doesn't apply. So 2 vacant lots, 2 vacant 50-foot lots, you're not going to be able to build on both of them. You're going to have to recombine the build.
That was my question.
Yep.
Thank you.
Ben, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, am I to understand that the exception, or the fellow in the audience who's having this issue, my understanding is that his problem is that he doesn't meet the lot area requirements, which are the 20,000 square foot requirements. Does that sound correct?
I'm actually not familiar right now off the top of my head with what Mr. Borden's situation is. If Mr. Haskett could.
They're both, the Burdens, the two brothers, they both own, I believe, what is a 50-foot lot. And
Yes.
they both are non-conforming because they don't meet the lot width or lot area.
So, well, and the width is addressed in the other one, but the area, do we know the area of those lots?
I can't recall, but I think both of them together is less than 20,000 square feet. Yeah.
But individually, so they're like 10,000.
Individually, significantly
Significantly
less than
less.
20,000.
And I think
Just
that-
trying to understand.
And if I remember correctly, that they got transferred to the two brothers after September 5th, 2018. So that's why
That's right.
that's why
I see, so it's the data
sibling
transfer,
relationship.
not about the size. Because I know that we've heard from other people where the issue wasn't, in this item 2, wasn't the 20,000 square feet, they had like 19,000.
Right.
And in that scenario, and those folks have identified issues, and they would still be, again, left out of this. So I guess one question I would ask is, while as minor changes might be acceptable by council, would it be acceptable to just edit where it says exceeds the lot area requirements? Can you change that to a number? Exceeds 19,000 square foot, and maybe we catch another person in it? Or is that something, once again, you feel more comfortable? Is it not small enough?
You clearly have no risk if you don't make any changes. And if you do make changes, you have some risk. The greater the change, the greater the risk. You can make, the way it's typically looked at is if someone who had notice of the meeting and understanding of what the ordinance was would expect that sort of change to be made, then it won't then it won't affect the amendment's validity. But if a change is made that's substantial enough that someone would have shown up if they'd known you were going to make that change, then that would be something that is in
Well, and they
is
came
a
to that
problem.
meeting a couple times ago. I think it was two meetings ago. They were there, and that was their issue, was just that 20, they didn't meet the width, but they were 1,000 off the 20,000 square feet, which is your lot area requirement.
But the way this works is there's a huge amount of gray area.
Right.
It's pretty clear to see, you change an A to an at because you meant to make it an at and not an A. that's easy, you can do that. And then you make a change where you're talking about some other portion of the ordinance, that's easy, you can't do that. But everything in the middle is a pretty gray area where any change you make, you increase the risk. The smaller the change, the less the risk. Any other questions?
If I could just make one more comment to Mr. Nason's question. 4B would have been the exception that's close to what the Burton brothers, what their issue is. But in this case, the deed date is beyond that. Yeah.
So is it just a matter of changing the deed date?
It would be a
That
change,
would be
it would be a matter,
fairly easy thing, right?
I think their lots were recorded in 2016, is that correct? January of 2016? Okay, well, yeah, if you were to change the date, but
Keep the same date, change the year.
it would still have to go to the planning board was
If you change the year, you'd have to go to the planning board?
How'd you come up with 2015, Wes? Remind me.
the,
That was prior to the situation that arose for that one. It was a date prior to when the siblings had ownership of that group of properties.
it was, I misspoke, it was exception 3. The lot is one of 3 or less adjacent non-conforming lots under the ownership of related siblings on September 5th, 2018.
And September 5th, 28, actually, my fault.
Yeah.
That's a different date in one of the other ones. September 5th, 2018, I'm sorry, is the date you adopted the ordinance that closed the door. So if they had it at that time, then it cut it off.
So changing that date is such a substantial change that you'd have to go back to the board.
I'm not going to say it is or it isn't. It's a change that has a risk. It's a smaller change than you could make. I mean,
Well, I just think
text-wise, it's a very small change in terms of what it opens up. Are you taking it away completely? Are you picking a particular date that's a little bit farther out? Those are both significantly different situations.
It would be from September 2018 to January 2019 for Mr. Bird.
Yeah, so that would move it 5 or 6 months. All
At
right.
the same time, you might be opening the window for other property owners as well.
So you said that last statement might be open the window for other property owners. So if we picked another date to implement there, to take care of those that probably are going to continue to come to the planning board and to the council for us to add other amendments to this policy.
It's certainly possible, yes, sir.
Okay.
But by extending it from September to January, you do open the door for probably
Well, I was thinking,
other situations.
extend it to now.
There could be other situations we're not aware of, exactly.
Today's date.
I was thinking as of this meeting, if it's passed.
Any other questions? All right. So, Mr. Sharp.
Mayor, Town Council. I just want to thank you for putting it back on your agenda. It was, as was tracked, it's been a long time. For my client, it's been well over a year, and he's been patient and has worked through the process and has attended a lot of meetings to do this. And I think that your planning board chairman summarized it very well. You've gone through a good process. The town council has instructed the planning board to act. The planning board has done so. You've come in and you've thoroughly discussed it. And so we were very disappointed when it was proposed to delay this for several months, and we're glad you put it back on. We thank you for doing that, and we're ready for you to take your action when you get to it.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Brad Sanford. And if I could ask that when folks come to the podium, if you could state your name and address, please.
Mayor, council members, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Brad Sanford. Our property address is 226 and 224 Wax Myrtle Trail here in Southern Shores. 7 families, 7 of us, all related, all siblings, own this property. We inherited it in 1997. Our mother gave it to us after owning it for 5 years. We've used it for 27 years. All 7 family members own it. My wife and I manage it for everybody. We don't rent it. We divide it up and use it all weeks of the year, 7 weeks apiece generally. We love it so much that the fight is over who's going to retire there. In 1998, the lot next door became available, so we purchased it as an opportunity to protect that lot and the view and our house, and with the intention that somewhere down the road we can use that lot either to build on or to sell and get money. And this spring in 2019, we determined that it was time to renovate the cottage. It's been 25 years and it needed new siding, new roof, a number of things. And I'm the oldest of this family group. I've got other siblings who have kids in elementary school who are part of this family. And we all contribute, since we don't rent it, to keeping it up. And so we decided to sell the lot in order to pay for the renovations. We wanted to get started right away though, so some of us who could afford to fronted the money to get started. We got started, I put a sign on the lot. Next thing I know, I got a bunch of calls. I got people, plenty of people who will pay the full asking price, and I find out I can't sell it. Only because I own it. Because I own the lot, the house next door, and the lot. If I owned the lot, one lot over, I could have sold it. But I can't sell this lot. It's 108 feet wide, but it's only 171 feet deep, so it's 18,500 square feet. Zoning requires 20,000 square feet to be conforming. I looked at most of the lots in Southern Shores, particularly on Wax Myrtle Trail. Most of them are not 20,000 square feet. A lot of lots have over 20,000 square feet, but only 85 square feet of frontage. They're non-conforming as well. We're in a dilemma right now. We've stopped the renovation process because it looks like we can't sell a lot. And we need to repay those of us who've loaned money to the family entity to get this going. So our dilemma is, do we have to sell the house now that we've had all these years and have started renovations on in order to get out of this dilemma? We really don't want to do that. We've got 33 kids and grandkids, and we have restructured our family organization prior to starting all this in order to prepare for the next generation to take over. And that's why we're doing the renovations, to keep them, to give them something that's simple. Please, if you would, consider the proposed text amendment to the zoning and help us out. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess the question I would have is with this ZTA we're talking about tonight cover his situation or not?
I haven't looked specifically at his properties, but,
Is the other, what would matter is the other lot conforming or not? Is the lot with the house on it conforming
I'm
or
not
not
that, I have not looked at them, honestly, I haven't seen them. So I do not know.
It's going to be close. It's going to matter. What's going to trigger is whether or not the lot that the house is on is conforming or non-conforming. If it's non-conforming, then it meets an exception. If it's conforming, then it doesn't meet the exception.
But isn't item 4 small room number 4 where that allows us to get out of this dilemma?
Maybe. It depends on...
Because both lots are non-conforming.
Okay, then yes. Then item 4A would allow you, would be an exception that would apply. If both lots are non-conforming, then item 4A would apply.
So this would address his situation?
Sounds like it. I'm
So,
not-
so those, in that situation, they've got the 100-foot width, they just don't have the 20,000 square foot requirement that would make them conforming, and so that's why it would be item 4 and not item 2. Item 2 That
Yes.
just-
Yes. Emily Osban?
I'm Emily Osband. I live at 177 Chickahawk Trail, and I'm not here to address the council members because they already know my situation, more for the public, just to hear another situation. So I have a beach cottage on Duck Road that was built by my parents in the 70s. At the time, I think the road was platted at 50-foot lots. They wanted something a little larger, so they bought a lot and a half and built a beach cottage, which is non-conforming because that lot is just under 20,000 square feet. It's 19-something, I think. Then we had an opportunity just 1 year ago to buy a small lot, 50 feet wide, on Trout Run. And that lot is perpendicular to the lot with the house on it and only partially adjacent. So it doesn't share a whole property line, just part of it. And it faces, that lot's address is Trout Run, and the other house where there's a house is Duck Road. So anyway, this has really been a long, kind of exhausting situation. And the way I look at it, I seem to have two non-conforming lots that touch each other, but the really important part to remember is that I've only owned the lot on Trout Run for a little over a year. And before signing that contract and paying for that lot, I was 100% assured by the town of Southern Shores, by Wes, by Peter, and anyone else, can't remember who all I talked to, that that was a buildable lot. We had it surveyed, we had it checked out, you know, in fact, so we did everything we were supposed to do, and it was purchased under that promise that it would be buildable. So I'm going to be very disappointed if that turns out not to be the case. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Austin.
I'd like to ask Ms. Osband, did you mention that those two lots front on different streets also? I did. Okay, I missed that part. That's very critical, I think.
Michelle Masluk? You may have. Okay, and Joe Masluk? Okay. Ms. Schertzman? Depends on how long you want to go.
Just checking.
As long as you're reasonable, I think we'll be fine.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Ann Schertzma, 69 Hickory Trail. Thank you for allowing me to speak yet again on the non-conforming lots issue. I'm going to take a bit of a holistic approach here, which is a little different, and look at the intent of Frank Stick, his partners, the Kitty Hawk Land Company, and the expectations of the people of this town who bought property here. I believe that to the extent that ZTA 1809 PB01 allows the creation of 50-foot wide oceanfront lots and their subsequent development, it should be opposed. It should not be permitted. That is not what was intended. That is not the expectation of the people who live in this town. I don't believe that conforms to our land use plan. I think that's too much population density on our ocean front. And I think if you'll read section 36202, which pertains to the RS Single Family Residential District, you'll see the intent there is to ensure that the density of population in the district is managed by the establishment of minimum lot sizes, setbacks, height limits, etc. We're doing more than creating exceptions for individuals that we know of if we enact this ZTA without questioning the intent behind it. I oppose those provisions of ZTA 1809 PB01 that would permit the development of 50-foot wide lots on the ocean front. If you go back to the restrictive covenants in the deeds, you'll find people bought property with covenants saying that they had to be 100-foot wide developments or at minimum 75-foot wide. To suddenly say we're going to allow a 50-foot wide lot on the ocean front to be developed because 3 siblings now own the 3 properties that the parents once owned is to deny the intent of the builders, the developers, the town, and it's in our town code and our land use plan. That's the way I look at it. I have a lot of empathy with many of the people here. I don't like the way this ZTA was designed. I don't think it's a good idea to carve out exceptions based on known inequities to identifiable persons. I think it's better to identify principles and intent and to look at land use policy. So rather than what appears to be favoritism. I would have preferred that the planning board had looked at the actual platting of this town and seen why we have lots on CO's trail that are less than 100 feet wide, or on Wax Myrtle Trail that are less than 20,000 square feet in area. This town was developed in segments, the ocean front first. I think it makes much more sense to start there instead of, we've been at this for a year, and more than a year, instead of trying to fix things and then discovering, wait a minute, we've stepped on that person's shoes or toes. Wait a minute, that person can't sell this property to finance this renovation. That doesn't seem fair. What's fair to me is to respect the intent of the development, of the expectations of the people who bought here. And Southern Shores is well known for having low density in terms of population. And when you start allowing lots like the one at 64 Ocean Boulevard to be developed, it's a 50-foot wide lot, 17,000 square feet in area, you are allowing density to increase. You know, I don't favor that kind of approach. Excuse me, it's my turn to speak. And I also have had an issue with Ben about the application of the previous ZTA that existed, 36-132. We're not starting from scratch here. When there was one property sold by Saga had 137.5 foot wide property, vacant. It split off 50 feet and sold it to the property owner who now holds 64 Ocean Boulevard. I don't believe our ordinance allowed that sale. Ben disagrees.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to object to highlighting individual persons in this room.
Excuse me, Mr. Connors.
There is no reason to be highlighting and bringing attention to individuals. You yourself just said we should be talking about the principles and not talking about the individuals. So I really object to you highlighting both Saga and Mr. Love.
Your objection is noted, Mr. Connors. May I continue?
Well, I'm waiting for an answer from Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, can we address that issue one way or the other? I just don't think it's fair to be highlighting individual people here.
Or individual incidents. I agree with you, Jim. At the same time, I want Ms. Shorters to finish her remarks. Please finish your remarks.
Yeah, I'm not sure that fairness is the point of a public comment, Mr. Connors. I'm here to express my opinion, and certainly...
I'm asking you to do it without highlighting other people in the town in a negative way. And I think the mayor just backed me up on that. So
and I think
please continue with your comments.
I think you cast the negative light. When my point was that there was a 137-foot wide lot that was split. That's my whole point. We'll leave it at that.
Can we go on, please?
Yes, we
Thank you.
can. Again, I would just close by saying I think it's the platting of the town, the development of the town that's critical. There's 60-foot wide lots on Skyline Road that are non-conforming, that shouldn't be non-conforming because that's the way they were sold. There's 70-foot wide lots in Seacrest Village that are non-conforming, that shouldn't be because that's the way they were sold. Our town is a patchwork, and I think it would behoove the planning board and this body to look at the development of the town and consider that applying these minimum dimensions across the board to all of these areas is unfair, and that we're kind of not getting at a solution here. And I also agree with Matt Neal on ZTA 19X that the A2 section is flawed because of the issue he brought up with having two vacant lots next to each other. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Shorten. Is there anyone else who hasn't already spoken who wishes to speak? If you would raise your hand, I'll call on you and have you come up. All right. Mr. Ward.
Good evening, council. I wasn't planning on, excuse me, I'll back up. Andy Ward, 147 Bayberry Trail. I wasn't planning on coming up here tonight, but I feel compelled to address you all as a planning board member, but I'm standing up here as a private citizen. We have worked on this, all of us in this room, for over a year. The planning board has been at it, and we have dug in and we have given you the best information that we had to put forward to make some decisions. You're here tonight to make those decisions. I'm not sure that I've heard any arguments tonight saying that you shouldn't vote for this PB01, 1809 PB01, that we have tried to identify and have then brought to you 5 known exceptions that we felt had merit to move forward with what you're dealing with. But what we're trying to get across, and Elizabeth touched on it, but what we're trying to get across is this is what we know at the time that has merit, that should be let in under the fence, and stop non-conforming issues moving forward. And we also talked about potentially, rather than asking someone like Mr. Burton to present himself with a ZTA that cost him money, we know that he deserves to be let in this equation. We can move forward ourselves as a planning board to create a ZTA to let Mr. Burton in, because he deserves to be in. Everybody sitting up here says Mr. Burton needs to be in. There are other people sitting out here that are already in, and so be it. They should be. So it's up to you tonight to vote to move this thing forward or kick it down the road some more, and we'll take another look at it. We really will. But we beat it to death pretty good, and I think we've done a pretty good job to get it to you tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, Mr. Mayor, I'll close the public hearing. I did want to mention, as we've considered in the past, Mr. Nason has a somewhat narrow but likely conflict if someone makes a motion to pass this as presented. That if someone makes that motion, we'll also have to address a motion to recuse Mr. Nason.
I'd like to make a motion to approve and adopt ZTA 1809 PBO1, as presented by the planning board.
And I'll follow the rule or the guidance of the town attorney as well as the council to recuse myself if that's appropriate.
You'll need to have the board vote on that, but
Yes,
I think
yes.
it's probably appropriate to see if there's a second first.
I'll second Mr. Schuyler's motion. Any further discussion, council?
Well, you need to.
I'm
deal
sorry,
with
I'm
Mr.
sorry, I'm sorry.
Nason's request to be recused. Would somebody make the motion to recuse Mr. Nason?
I'd make a motion that we recuse Mr. Nason from being involved in this particular hearing. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion?
What's the conflict?
I've had, even before we started, actually before I even took office, I've been friends and I've worked with the Loves, and their property is represented in this ZTA as one of the exceptions. Even though I no longer work for them and I haven't worked with them for over 6 months, town attorney feels it still could represent a conflict, and so I defer to you folks to determine it.
And I question the conflict idea too, whether it really is a conflict, but that's what we've been told it is, so. So we have a motion on the floor to recuse Mr. Nason from being allowed to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye. So you're recused, Chris. You made a motion, which has been seconded, to accept, Mr. Connors, you made a motion which is seconded to accept the PB ZTA 1809-PB01 and to implement that. Is that basically what you did?
Yes, it's just simply to adopt ZTA 1809 PBO1 as presented by the planning board.
Is there any further discussion, council?
Yeah, I guess I have a question. I don't know, this is a tough one to vote on. I agree with what Ann Schertzma said during her comments, that the intent of the planners and the developers of Southern Shores was to keep it a low-density population community. I don't want to open the floodgates for a lot of small houses being built in the town, because that definitely goes against what the founders of the town had proposed. That's one of the reasons we're all here. Hear me out, please. But yet at the same time, I put myself in the position of these people that are being hurt by actions the town has taken, not only in the last several months, but previously all through the planning process. I think I kind of agree. I'm not saying any specific person or organization, but I think our town has been botched up to a point where we have to deal with all of these non-conforming lots. It would be so nice if everything was 100 feet wide and in excess of 20,000 square feet, but it's not, and that's the way, and we got to deal with it. And I put myself in their position. I would hate to be told I could build on a lot and then the next day be told I can't, and now I'm stuck. What do I do with it? And that's where the unfairness comes in. And I've asked you this before, Ben, is there any way we can grandfather these people in without opening the floodgates to a lot of 50-foot lots being built? And I think the answer you've given me is it's kind of hard to do, and this PB or ZTA comes close to doing that, but yet it's not perfect. Can you explain
I think that's what you're talking about doing isn't technically grandfathering because you've already shut them down. So but it's reopening very narrow windows in the large heavy gate that you adopted last September to try and stop the proliferation of not folks who are developing their property next door, but folks who are figuring out that they could go and buy a bunch of other people's properties and develop them. And that there were these non-conforming lots in lots of situations. And I think that this is an attempt not to open the floodgates. It's an attempt to allow some narrow exceptions. And I think that they're pretty narrow. I mean, some of them are more narrow than I would have expected people would have wanted, but that's what they are. Could they be more narrow? Yes. Could they be broader? Yes. But that's really a policy decision for y'all to decide how much you want to open it. But I think that in this case, in this situation, the exceptions that are here, the broadest exception, the one that's going to happen the most is I. It's the first one. And that was there in 1980s. That was there in the 1990s. That was there in the 2000s. That was there last year before September, and it's there now. It stands out because it's now in a list of others, but that exception has always existed. And that's the exception that's going to allow the majority of the development that happens to occur on non-conforming lots. Because I think that when you start breaking the subsets down into non-conforming lots under the same ownership, it very quickly gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And then as you broaden that out and say, how many have more than 2 or 3, how many have houses on them, how many were after this date or before that date, you've taken it and narrowed it much tighter than it could be. And I think it's narrower. Currently what's on the books is certainly narrower than what was there previously. And I think that this is not getting all the way back to what was there previously. I think it's still narrower than that.
Do you see any loopholes? I mean, some of it's sprawl, I know that, but, or any,
I don't know exactly what a loophole, I mean, do I see any loopholes that are going to allow somebody to go and redevelop the whole town or large blocks of the town on non-conforming lots after buying a bunch of houses? I don't see anything that's going to do that. But I'm also not perfect. So, the folks who wrote this before me, I consider, whether they were planning staff or lawyers or whoever they were probably smarter than me. So they didn't necessarily get it right. And I'm not guaranteeing that I haven't, messed something up. But I've done what I can. And if I saw a loophole, I'd probably have tried to fix it.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Fred.
Gary? You just assume I've got something to say?
I know.
Yes. I'm just remembering how we got here. And it's all about what you want. When we started this, a couple of members wanted to shut down those 50-foot lots because of some development and things that took place. It was rushed forward. So I'm still, if you set up a code and then after a year, you're still sitting there looking at exceptions, and then the night you're looking at the revision, more exceptions come forward. Well, maybe we need to just throw it out and start from scratch. I mean, when you look at what we're doing, don't disagree with it. My experience has been over my lifetime that I've seen development didn't happen, change, then it happens. It's gonna come. whether we like it or not. So the only thing I would ask is to amend this, that the dates in here reflect August 6, 2019, instead of September 5, 2018, and what was the other one? January 1st, 2015, when we pass this tonight.
So in other words, what you're getting at is put a date of when this thing passes.
Yeah, today.
Yeah, that seems fair.
Well, granted, I understand you're gonna tell me there's gonna be risk to that. I
Well,
don't care.
no, it's not a risk. One of them works the way you think it works. The other one, it's the opposite.
Okay, well, then
So don't change both dates if what you want to do is
the
let in
January I
more.
shouldn't change.
The January one needs to stay the same.
Then the September 5th, 2018 should be changed to August 6th, 2019 upon passage of this bill, if it passes.
Or September 6, 2019.
Yeah, September 6th, I'm sorry. Today is, it is September.
Yep. Already got there.
Man, I don't keep up with days of the week and dates.
Everybody hear that?
So to do that, you'd have to make a motion to amend.
Make a
Made a
motion.
motion
Make a motion to get.
to change the date of September 5th, 2018 to September 6th, 2019.
Do I have a second to Gary's motion?
Yeah, I'll second it.
All right. Any further discussion of that motion to amend the original motion? All in favor of the amendment that Gary's proposed, indicate by saying aye.
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 Now we're back to talking about the original motion, right?
Yes, we are.
I'd like to just call a vote. I'm not asking the mayor to do that, but I think we've talked about this enough over the last year. I think it's just time to vote.
Council, all in favor of approving ZTA 1809 PB01 with the amendment earlier made by Mr. McDonald, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Motion's made and carried. ZTA's 1801 PB01 is now been accepted. Thank you. You want to close the public hearing? Okay, thank you. Under item 7, Council, we have a consideration of Council's 8/6/2019 direction to our town manager and the active town manager interim town manager to provide a list of consulting firms to go forward to hire a town manager.
Mr. Mayor, before we move on, can we discuss this thing that Ben wrote up that is under the scenario?
I'm sorry, you're right. Item 2, consideration of separate ordinance that addresses only the tear down of a structure located on 2 or more non-conforming parcels of land. That one?
Yes.
Yeah, we certainly can. Thanks for bringing that to my attention.
Well, I'd like to start off by saying I brought this up so that we could have a discussion of what would happen if we went back and repealed what we passed last year and started from scratch. Now, I've heard a lot of good stuff from people here where it sounds like people have already been having that discussion and they're not for it. But if we don't go back and repeal what we did last year, what we passed last year, and just let this one that Ben just wrote up for this, and just let this go away, I think we need to continue to look for those non-conforming lots. We had a gentleman that sent all council an email where he's got one up on, it's in Seacrest Village, which come to find out, I don't think any of the lots, or not very many of the lots in Seacrest Village are conforming lots by the code. So what I'd like to do is see if we can ask the planning board to go back and look at those. We're going to be dealing with these exceptions for a while. And if you have, this gentleman has bought 2 lots. One has a house on it, the other does not. So under this, he's under the impression, under what we just passed tonight, he's under the impression that he will have to recombine. But those things were always sold as separate lots. They're about 17,000 square feet. Now, I'm pretty sure that there may be some in Seacrest Village that are 20,000 square feet and 100 foot wide, but not many of them. So I think, I'd like to make a motion that we ask the planning board to look at those situations, those lots there, and continue, well, no, just that they look at the lots in Seacrest Village and see if they warrant an exception to what we passed last year.
I'll second that motion. What I'm interested in is a comprehensive approach. Maybe that's what you're getting at, and I think Ann might have been getting at the same thing. We're all getting at it a different way. But the core problem is the fact that the town was platted with 50 to 100 foot lots. We didn't create the situation. A lot of you folks didn't create the situation. We're stuck with it. So I don't know what the answer is, so I'm seconding your motion because short of repealing the original, which I understand that a lot of folks in the town don't want to do, I do believe that the core of the issue, what started this whole thing, was, to Jim's point, that somebody took a house that happened to be on the ocean front or near the ocean front that was across the property line, tore it down. It was already 2 properties, and they built 2 homes on it. That's what triggered this whole thing.
Exactly.
So the question would be, do we want to just narrow our emphasis just to that situation where there's, in that case, the determination is that there's a structure across a property line. And you could get a little nuance and say there's a structure across in a setback if you want to get there. But if that, I think that is where we started. And we've kind of gotten crazy. And I'm not running again, but I know that those of you who are on council are going to get 8 million more of these applications. And you're going to get, there's no way that Ben, despite his best efforts, the planning board's best efforts, can ever identify all these. And it seems like it's like a game of whack-a-mole. So I would second it. I think we need to try to figure out another way to address the real problem. But part of that's determining what the real problem is. And so I would support your recommendation with the idea of let's keep working on this. I think it still can be better. Fred, you brought that up too a little. It's not perfect. What can we do that's better? What are our core goals? It'll probably bleed into the next council, and but that's fine too. At least we've done something now.
I think that we know of the ones in Seacrest Village, so we could easily ask the planning board to look at those and the appropriate draft ZTA amendment or ZTA made up to address those, because then they are now the ones we know of.
But it's everything on the hill. It's every single lot on the hill, on the hills. I mean, wax myrtles, all those are. I mean, it's.
If the planning board wants to look at those ones also,
I don't know.
I would address partly, at least to some degree, what Ann said earlier. I think this is not something we created. Southern Shores was developed, and I don't want to use the term hodgepodge, but it was developed over a longer period of time. It was developed by a father-son, a team first, not a father-son, and then the Seacrest Village is a little bit unique in that there are very few 20,000 square foot lots. So basically, you've got a non-conforming community up there. It's all part of our town. We didn't do it. We inherited it. How do we make the best of it? And I think we're getting some thoughts here tonight about how we can make the best of it. And I think we did the right thing in addressing the situation that impacted half a dozen or more property owners who had really put themselves in an awkward situation by purchasing property or owning property. It wasn't their fault. It just happened. I'm okay with asking the planning board to look at it further and maybe take Seacrest Village, as Mr. Connor said, take Seacrest Village as a kind of a sample and see what we can do there to make it so we don't punish people for owning property or having purchased or acquired property or inherited property.
And I think also if the planning board comes up with other examples, go ahead and look at those too. Don't restrict yourself only to Seacrest Village. But we know Seacrest Village is a problem.
And the other challenge we have as a town is that we've said, as a board, we don't want big houses, right? So we don't want big houses, I mean, this is just general, but we don't want small houses
But
either.
we don't want little houses either.
So we're putting ourselves in an impossible box here, in the sense that, okay, well, they're small lots, they're gonna be smaller homes. As a return on investment, anything that's not on the oceanfront isn't going to, on a smaller lot, is only gonna be so big, because you just simply can't get the investment back. So, maybe that's a new council directive, is to determine, well, are we encouraging smaller homes, or just saying no larger homes, or, that balance is really tricky.
We will limit that, we pretty much limited a monster home. We've limited house size to 6,000 square feet, which is not a monster home. We know it'll handle 12 bedrooms, but it's not a monster. It's not a 9,000 or 10,000 square foot home, which is happening in some of the towns right now.
It all comes down to a couple of things. I mean, what the town wants, and that, and planning for this town. And we don't do it. Code rewrite, where is it? I've been on this board for almost 4 years now. It was going before I came on board, and it's still going on. We don't know what's going to happen with that, which could have solved a lot of these issues that we deal with and the planning board deals with. We funded to rewrite our land use plan, which would direct where we wanted to go as a town. And it was all of a sudden voted down. We didn't need to do that anymore. So, it's what we want for our town. Do we want development? Do we want a high-rise motel over here instead of Pelican Watch? Do we want what? Business down on the beach? It's all about what you want. So we need to plan it out. And I think if we completed some of the things that we've had in place, we could have done that. But what we do is we talk about it and we pass something and we pass something else. I'm sorry. This board needs a plan and to go forward with.
Thank you, Gary. I need a vote, council, in favor of or not. All in favor of passing the tear down of a structure located on two or more non-conforming parts of land and building two or more structures.
His motion was
Send
to
it back
pass
to
it.
planning board. to talk about.
Send it back to planning board. That's
Or
what.
just
Yeah,
send-
just to look
Look at
for
Seacrest
further
Village.
exceptions.
And you're going to specifically talk about Seacrest Village to start with, right?
Right. I mean, we're giving them direction to look at Seacrest Village, but not necessarily holding them to Seacrest Village only.
Got
If
it.
they know of others, bring it on.
We have a motion and
Well, with that, I think you're talking about zoning districts, basically, right?
Talking about what?
Zoning districts?
No,
Well, you're talking about Seacrest. Would their zoning be different from
that's
what
like
you
a
have on the
different
front?
community, but same zoning districts. See, it's like Duckwoods Drive community,
Could be a district,
Chickahawk community.
yes.
They're not different zoning districts.
But what you're talking about is looking at Seacrest Village different from the rest of the town.
Yes, because they were platted differently and
Then
they're
you're talking
chopped.
about a zoning district. You're
No,
creating
not
a
Not a
special
zoning
district.
district. Or, Wes, is it zoned differently?
No, the
Not
majority of
right
the
now.
town is RS1. Duckwoods Drive, Seacrest
I'm not
Village is all
proposing-
RS1.
Well, that may be an
That might be a
option.
way to go to it.
It's like an overlay. It's like an overlay to say, kind of similar to what Sherdsma had said, to say that this area is different than this area, and it's a little more nuanced. I'm not saying it's a solution, but I understand what Gary's saying.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, it's like,
I'm
you know,
kind
you'd
of
have
going
a
with what
beach.
you're saying. Let's be proactive in trying to identify what else is out there. Because right now, I know of Seacrest Village from two ways. One, I think it was the mayor that pointed out to me that those things are non-conforming. I should have known that because I've worked on lots there and I noticed that. But then we had an attorney that pointed out that he owns a couple of lots up there and they're not, that he's going to be forced into a recombination. but they were originally platted at 17,000 square feet, 90 feet wide, or whatever they are up there, but they're non-conforming as far as 100 feet wide and 20,000 square feet goes. And that is clearly not what we were trying to address.
I understand that. They've always been that way. I mean,
Exactly.
that's the way they are.
So,
You ride down those sections and that's what it is.
so we shouldn't punish them because of what they are. We
Well,
should-
I'm not saying,
yeah,
but
no
I know, but that's what you're talking about, is looking at an overlay district
I'm not
within the
talking about
town,
that. Not at this point. I'm not talking.
because what you do for them, if not, then Jim, what you're gonna be doing is exception, 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 exception.
That's the boat we've gotten ourselves into, yes.
That's absolutely correct. Lack of planning to get where we need to go.
Lack of planning, not on this council's part or the previous council's part.
Yeah, I think so.
I would say this is more of a refinement. I think what you're hearing is that you're both saying it the same way, and it is that this is maybe consensus is being developed. That maybe that zoning district idea might be a way to go forward in a way to not capture, so we can, in that situation, take out, maybe it's not just Seacrest, we can take out a whole swath of the community.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And say, okay, if you're not on a body of water, it's very unlikely that you're gonna be buying 5 lots and recombining. Right? It's just, that's unlikely to happen. So there's ways to deal with that. You're both kind of saying the same thing. I'm supporting that, just exploration. Maybe we just let them look at it.
I'd rather just get this into the planning board's hand, and if they want to talk about a different zoning district to address the problem with Seacrest Village, that could be one approach. If we want to make another exception to the ZTA, like what we passed tonight, that's another approach. But the whole purpose is, we need to continue to do exactly what you're talking about, being more proactive. Let's go out there and find these things and see where we need to keep modifying, or however we address this.
Well, I think we made that directive last May, that we find what those lots were.
Yes, and they found some, but they didn't find them all. So we passed something to address and give relief to the people that they found and that was pointed out to them.
But our direction was to look and find those non-conforming lots and bring it back and make a report. And they reported to the planning board and us.
They did that up to a certain point. They were not able to find every non-conforming lot. Now, at this point, I'd say, we got a motion on the floor, it's been seconded. Let's just get the planning board to look at this thing.
Well, I want to make a comment or two. I'd like to get in on this. What Gary's saying, I agree with him entirely. I mean, we're just doing point solutions. We just handle the point when we get to this one, then we move on to the next one. And I guess that's okay for tonight. The only reason I voted for this ZTA was because I saw some hardships, and I just didn't think it was right for people to have to suffer those hardships. But in the long run, and looking at the bigger picture, yes, there does need to be some planning. There's been absolutely none. It's been point solution, one after another. And as you say, there are going to be more. We may find more. And so, yeah, we can go look at Seacrest Village, but then we're opening up, well, what else is out there? So really and truly, what the planning board needs to be doing, I think, is looking at the big picture. I mean, we can have this in place right now, and we can look at Seacrest Village, but I think they need to go beyond just that one community. They need to look at all of Southern Shores. And this may not happen overnight. It could take quite a while. But one point solution after another, I don't think solves the problem. I really don't.
Wes, in order for the planning board to do what Fred is asking, to find all non-conforming, not necessarily all, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, would that entail a lot of expense in title researches and property research?
We already identified, and I presented how many non-conforming lots there are in the town.
800 and something, right?
I don't recall the number, I don't have it with me right now, but we've put in that time and effort, and we found the numbers of non-conforming lots, and we reported that to you all, and I reported it to the planning board.
And I think about half of those, or a third, were in Seacrest Village.
The problem with Seacrest Village, yes, there are a lot of non-conforming lots there, but what we could look at is to see how many are under same ownership that are adjacent to each other.
Right. At least one has been pointed out to us.
So, I mean, if it's a freestanding, non-conforming lot, not adjacent to land under same ownership, then they're not required to be recombined, so you could go ahead and probably take out a good portion of those lots. That's one way we could start, if y'all want to look at Seacrest Village. That's what I would suggest. And that would be the same for all the other non-conforming lots in the town. We just look and see if they're under, which non-conforming lots are under same ownership, but that
Yeah.
could take time
Put that
because,
filter on them.
because we have to, look into and, do research on the property ownership. That's what takes time.
And see, that's what, that would be the time, I mean, that's what we probably need to do, is look at how many of those lots are under same ownership. And how non-conforming are they, and what do you want as an end product? I mean, do you want a 50 by 50 lot and put a house on it?
We're not talking about that. Those lots are about
No,
70 to
I'm just
90
saying.
feet wide, and they're 17,000 square feet.
There's some lots there's a lot on Skyland Road that's 25 foot
Okay,
across.
you're
so-
outside the Seacrest Village. then.
Right,
Yeah,
but there's
okay.
lots that are really non-conforming, but they're lots, and they're platted.
Okay,
So,
excuse
you
me.
know,
Excuse me, we're wandering a little here. Let's get back to entertaining Jim's motion to pass this information, this venture to the planning board for their consideration. I have a motion, had a second. All in favor of doing what Jim has proposed, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion's made and carried to send this further ordinance consideration to the planning board for their consideration. Thank you. Under new business, consideration of Council 8/6/2019, direction of the town manager and the active town manager, interim town manager, provide list consulting firms to go forward to hire a town manager. That's tab 3 in our book. And Wes has provided this list to us. And I would suggest, based on my original comments about this whole selection process, I would make a motion to ensure a new town manager's education, experience, and qualities are compatible with the expectations of our new town council to be seated in December, which council will be working more closely with the new town manager during his or her initial years here for the best interest of the town. I move this council to defer all consideration of the selection of a search consultant and the hiring of a town manager to the incoming council to be seated in December 3rd, 2019. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, please explain your motion.
yeah,
I'm not sure I follow you.
Okay, I can slow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
The motion was to allow the selection of a search firm and of the new town manager to be the purview of the new council members that come on in December. That was all I was saying. I had to get it in a legal.
Sounds a lot better.
Everybody got that?
Yep, I got it.
Any questions?
Yeah.
I think we just need to move forward. Why you want to delay it?
I'm not delaying it. I'm saying we let the
There-
new council make that decision. The decision to pick a search firm and the decision to pick the new manager.
Well, they'll make the decision to pick the new manager.
I'm willing to make the decision to pick the search firm.
But to pick the firm, you got quality firms.
That's the names right here before us, and the new council will make the decision which one they want to use.
Well, I think this council should move forward on that since we voted on it at the last meeting to move forward on it.
We voted to get the list of firms that would help us.
That's right.
That's right. And I'm saying, we've done that, we've got the firms now. I want the new council to make the final decision about which group will work with us, and then ultimately make the decision of a town manager.
Doesn't that delay the process, though? I mean, if you don't start now, it's going to take a while to advertise and to start reviewing applications and interview process and all of that. If you wait till December, it's going to be well into the first of next year before you can really make a selection.
And what's the harm?
It slows things down.
Slows things down. What slows what down? The selection of a new manager.
Yeah.
We've got a manager in place. He's doing, as far as I can tell, he's doing a fine job.
That's not the issue. I mean, I would assume he would apply like anybody else. But I think we owe it to the public to open it up to a much broader set of applications.
And we'll do that.
Yeah, but why wait and do it? Why not do it right away? I mean, it makes more sense to start the process, then maybe by December or maybe January, we can make a selection. And if Wes is the most qualified applicant, he would be hired permanently in that position. If not, be someone else. I don't know. But I think we owe it to the public to give them that opportunity to know that we're going through a process. And
I
why
think-
not start the process now? Why wait to December? Let's get on with it.
That's a perfectly legitimate question. I just think it's more in keeping with having the, it's better for our town if the new council, which will come on board in December, make those choices and those decisions. They've got to work with that person for the next 4 years.
But they will be working and selecting that individual.
To me, what stands out to me in the mayor's motion, though, is that it's part of maybe some of the discussion we had last time, which is what are the qualities that we're looking for in a new manager? And I guess I'm not as worried about, I know it's going to take some time, I'm not as worried about the time part, but Gary and I are not going to be here. So to that extent, like, we may have different qualities.
You
than
may or
whoever's-
may not
than
be.
whoever-
May not either.
Well, let's assume yes, but there may be different qualities that are requested on the part of the new council. And to that extent, like, what are the criteria that we're looking for? Are we looking for X, Y, and Z? Well, truthfully, I don't want to saddle the new council with my opinions on this. And so that's where my head is with it. I don't care about a couple months in that sense. It's going to happen. We're going to do the search.
That's right.
If we didn't do the search, then Mr. Mayor, if you're making the motion not to do the search, then I definitely oppose it, because I agree with Fred, we need to go through that process.
And the thing is, Tom, bottom line is you've got 4 companies there, or 4 processes, and what we're going to do is we're going to pick one, and you're going to take the lowest cost, and you're going to move forward.
Not necessarily.
Well, that's usually the way you do it.
Can we hit a middle ground where we ask Wes to begin the interviewing process and get more information from these firms, so that December meeting, our last meeting, the new council comes in and he's got a recommendation of who to go to right away. Let's not try, because even though he's got a list, we don't necessarily, there's a process. What is the fee structure? You know, how do they work? Do we have a sense of, you know, pros and cons of each one? And that could be ready on December, which kind of bridges the gap between what the mayor's saying and perhaps
you have that
what you
now?
guys are saying.
What's your comfort level with that, Wes? You think it's your job to pick that group, or you better have council do that?
Well, I haven't really decided if I would apply or not, but I don't know how involved I should be in that process, but I'd be glad to look into and see what the fees are for these companies, if that's what council would
Even
like.
just a structure, maybe not the exact fee.
I could have a conversation with them and report back to you all and see what they have to say.
At our next meeting, perhaps.
Similarly, if they have pros and cons, I noticed one was an individual and the other ones are larger. So
Mr. Mayor, can I speak just a minute?
You certainly may, Bonnie.
I was here, I've been here when they've hired a manager a few times, and in the past, the council is the one that makes the decisions. The firm, when you pick the firm, you have to be able to tell the firm what you want in a manager, what you're looking for, the qualifications, experience, and that sort of thing. So the council makes those decisions. I mean, I can help, and I did help last time with that,
Thank you, Bonnie. I have a motion on the floor, council, to, just what I said a minute ago, to have the new council pick the search firm that will be searching for a manager for us, and to ultimately choose that town manager to serve our town. At this time, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion's made and carried to have the new council pick the, Sheila, you got that, Sheila? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I personally feel that that's just delaying the process. You were not in favor of going forward with this process at the last meeting. And, you know, that's just a delay tactic, Tom.
You expressed your opinion, Gareth.
No, I'm expressing it again.
And you can keep on expressing it. It's been voted on. We're going to have the new council pick the town manager and the firm that picks the town manager. And that's pretty much the end of it. Thank you. This time we have item B, which is a presentation of a petition for the council's consideration of curbing seasonal cut-through traffic on Hickory Trail, requested by Councilman Newberry. Tab 4.
Okay. Turn it over to me.
Yes, Fred.
Okay, there's been quite a bit of discussion since the last meeting about Hickory Trail. Matter of fact, I met with David Watson, who is leading that community, and they have petitioned for the town to block Hickory Trail as a means of curbing or reducing cut-through traffic. During that meeting, I asked him if he had considered discussion with Tommy Carroll, who is the chairman of the Citizens Committee that we agreed to sanction for looking at all alternatives or options for, I guess, slowing or curbing traffic on the cut-through on all of the town, not just Hickory Trail, but the Dogwoods up in the Dune area, and looking at more of a comprehensive plan. And I think what we've pretty much concluded, it's probably good to not only look at Hickory Trail, but look at all the others, but do it through the Citizens Committee that has been appointed. And rather than me go into any details, I would like to just call on Tommy Carroll to kind of give us a status of where they are in that process.
Are you talking about in the process of them meeting, they're having a committee meeting?
No, I'm talking about the process of where he is as far as organizing a committee and coming up with recommendations. I'm not expecting any recommendations tonight based on my discussions with Tommy.
Is it your suggestion, did I hear, I may not have heard this right, was it your suggestion that the Hickory matter be referred to Tommy's?
Yes.
Okay.
In other words, have a more holistic approach rather than just serving one street or two streets in the community, but looking at the overall problem, but not saying that we're not interested in what David Watson has presented, but make it part of a total plan rather than just, there again, one-point solution.
I mean, I'd support that. Does that need to be a motion, or does there even a requirement?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Council, Mayor, good evening. Wes, Sheila, I know you're in the whirlwind. Thank you. The traffic problem is real, and the opinions are many. And I've been somewhat overwhelmed with the amount of people that continue to come forward that have an opinion. Opinions ranging from solutions to no solutions, okay? I have people stopping at my house, calling at my business, calling at my house, putting stuff in my email, my mailbox. So I have set up an email, which is the abbreviation for Town of Southern Shores, TOSS, TOSStraffic@gmail.com. So if anyone wants to get involved, call me, email me, and I'd be glad to listen and get them involved. I plan on, initially, I think the goal here was to have the committee formed and have the recommendations to the council in that November timeframe, and that goal is lofty because there's a lot more to it than I ever imagined. So to give the council all the information and to hear from all the people that are expressing opinions, I think that goal is a little lofty. Okay, so I would shoot for December. I don't know how realistic that is, okay? Sheila, I'll be in touch. I'd like to set up a couple of public forums for people to come out and express their opinions, and I know I have to go through Sheila to set up the scheduling for the Pitt Center, and I will do that. I'd like to have 2 forums, one in October and another one in November, depending on holiday schedules and what have you. You know, it's not overwhelming. The traffic, I'm not prepared to give you it's so much bigger than I ever anticipated. And after speaking and meeting with David Watson, he has a whole nother group that I wasn't aware of. So I can assure you it'll be thorough, and we'll give you the information that you need to make a decision in one way or the other. Okay? And that is my update. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but that's where we stand.
So you'd mentioned some public forums coming up, because that was a question.
Yes, and I'm working on those dates now, and I should be able to announce those dates, if I'm not interrupting you, within the next week or so.
Excellent.
And I would hope that maybe we can get them out on the town newsletter or out on so people can get, we want as much input. And the input, I initially thought that the traffic problem was, we know there's a traffic problem, but the people who were concerned with the traffic were a smaller group of people that it's way bigger than I ever anticipated.
Well, and to follow that up, and I agree with you, and some of the folks who created this petition are probably on that list now. It's important and that you create a trail of those emails, and I don't know the best way to do that, but this is a town endeavor. This is a town.
Correct.
So I'm a little concerned, but I think there's a way around it, which is that you've got this private email account that people are sending things to, and I'm not saying that you're doing anything wrong. You're trying to solve a problem, but I think that maybe there's a way going forward that we make sure that maybe they don't get lost, so that if later on we want to find them, they're searchable and they're public record and we're transparent. And so I was encouraged to hear about the meetings that are coming up in the public forums, but there's work with council, work with staff.
A great point, and I'd have to ask Ben, as in any hot topic in any town, there are people who I've spoke to that have their opinions and don't want to be, they want to keep to themselves. If they email or they any contact that I have with people, is it a matter of public record? I don't know.
But that's really important.
Okay.
Because some of the folks on Hickory have done a very good job of documenting their thoughts. And we here as council hear a lot of people's opinions, and they're not willing to kind of go on the record with it. But I think what's critical is that people have to go on the record. This is not a big secret thing. This is not, well, I need you to do this. So that email trail is important for transparency, so that we can go back and figure out. But if they're not willing to do that, then as far as I'm concerned, they're not willing to really put their name out there. So whether it's a list from you, spoke to this person, here's what they said, We need to keep really meticulous records of who you're talking to and what exactly they're saying, so that we can make good evaluations. Otherwise, it's just hearsay, and I don't think that's what you're doing. I just
Okay.
want to watch.
Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but since this is a council-sanctioned committee, any email that he receives on this topic is public record. Is that not true?
Yeah, we have no way of knowing that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's probably true. There's a narrow window where it wouldn't be a committee that was subject to the Public Meetings and Public Records Act, but my recollection of the motion that created them is that they're essentially a public advisory committee of more than one person. And once you have a body of more than one person, you have a body that has to follow the public meeting
Yes.
rules, and then if they're transacting public business via documentation, paper or email or text or anything that's a document, then that's a public record.
Right. So the emails he receives at Town of Southern Shores Traffic at gmail.com, those are public record emails.
Most likely. I mean, if somebody emails and it says, "Tommy, you want to go to lunch?" That's not a public
No,
record.
no, I don't mean.
But
Yeah.
I mean, we see that here too. That's not a public record.
Right.
Personal email. You can't.
Actually,
you
I
can't
would
look
make
at
an
the
argument that is part of public record, because they may be going to lunch to talk about.
Well, it's not. I mean, well, what I'm getting at is the
I-
medium doesn't define whether or not it's a record.
It's what you're
The
discussing.
content defines whether or not it's a record.
Right.
So you have to look at the content to determine whether or not it is a public
And
record.
so
But if they're
if Tom-
transacting public business, then
If
it's a
Tommy
public
is the
record.
chairman, and we put trust in him to sponsor or the citizens committee, then we can be assured that he's going to be transparent and bring forth those emails if requested, copies of those emails.
Yeah. Or you could, I mean, you'd have to ask Wes and Sheila, but just like you have council emails, or at some
Yeah.
point you did through the town. I can't remember if we're in the stage of we do have one or don't have one, but I know it's been there in the past. The town could have an email that could be the filter email as well.
Well, it depends on, do we want to put that burden on town staff to go through those emails and
Well,
to
town
pass
staff-
them to Tommy?
Well,
Is that what-
it's not well, you could have it automatically passed to Tommy, but it actually lessens the burden on the staff because they don't have to go to Tommy to get the public records.
Okay, could,
If somebody does make a request, then they've got a copy on their end that does the same thing.
well, in that case, could the town create an email for this purpose? Make it a town email and have it automatically forwarded to Tommy? That way,
We can talk to our IT folks. I think
Yeah.
we could probably find a way to do that, but I don't think that'll be a problem. And then, of course, we can coordinate the advertisements and everything else required for the meetings and the forums.
I think that would be better than using his private email. Make it
I
an
would agree.
official town email.
I would agree.
And then similarly, Wes, not to put more on you, but we're getting a lot of, just the past couple of days, we get a lot of folks we've heard from the Hickory folks, now there's a lot of people who say they don't want to use Hickory. We've got a plethora of emails, so it's important on the council level, maybe there's a way for staff, as you're reading those, and I don't know if you see those emails, but to be able to pass those on to Tommy too, because he's got, we don't want to, all of us council don't want to have to forward it on to him either. We want it to get to Tommy directly, and there's a lot of, there were 7 today or something.
Yeah, there were a lot of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But there was a lot.
Well, they're worried about closing that one that's going to direct the traffic up and through their.
That's right. But nonetheless, it's all part of your research, right?
Yes,
You need
yes.
to get that information.
I'll be glad to meet with Tommy. We can discuss how he wants to move forward, and we can set this up.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach.
Okay,
Thank you, Wes.
very good.
Do you have any committee members formed yet?
Yes,
How many are,
there are two committee members as of now, Vicky Green and David Watson and myself. Okay, that process has been delayed a little bit to the death of my father and sickness during the summer. So I've been out of town a lot. But now that my business is closing, I'll, for the season, I can go into full steam.
Did we as
Okay.
council have the ability to approve these members, or was that, I can't remember. Was it, Tommy just picked it?
No, we
Okay.
don't.
That's fine, I didn't remember.
Totally citizens. We're staying out of it other than.
And I've
volunteer,
tried,
you know.
Jim, and answer your question, I've tried to get a true cross-section. You know, if I get a total committee of everyone that's on South Dogwood Trail or Hickory Trail, I am trying to get a true, trying to get up in the dunes. As the mayor has mentioned, there's a lot of things to consider here, a lot of things to consider, as far as what the intent of the closing traffic is, who you're going to affect, who's going to inconvenience, who's not going to inconvenience, and the whole. So in order to do that, I have taken my time, and I've talked to some people who have preconceived notions, and they know what the solution is, how much it's going to cost, and in their minds, and I don't think that's a good committee member. So I am taking my time, and I have talked to a number of people. Okay? That answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, you got 2 committee members right now.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And one of them has already stated that they have a preconceived notion they want to close it.
No, I have talked to
Right,
some.
I'm just understanding.
No, not one of those people. But I have.
No, I've got the emails. There's a preconceived notion that they want to close Hickory. I know that for a fact. There's one member that already has that.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so, and I don't care, but don't say that you're picking folks that don't have a preconceived notion.
Yeah, but as we've talked to David, David was Hickory Trail, and then when he learned that there was a committee to do it in the entire town,
That's fine, just
then,
don't,
okay.
let
yeah,
them have their preconceived notions, then just, that's okay.
Okay. All right. Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Any further discussion about this, council? Our last order of business here is appointment of the Reconstruction Task Force, which is tab 5 in your book. And go to the second page of that tab 5. And what you have there is existing Reconstruction Task Force, the way it's now exists. But going down the list, council member number 1, council member would stay exactly the same. Number 2, council member would stay exactly the same. Planning board chairperson, planning board vice chairperson would serve on that same task force. The town manager, Board of Adjustment member would be David Neal, is the only new name to add to the list at this time. All the others say that town manager would now be Wes Haskett. Deputy town manager would be the same. Chief of Police David Cole, Fire Chief Ed Limbacher. SSCA president would change to Rod McGowie. And the CPOA rep would still be the president of the CPOA. And the community construction rep would be Matt Neal, OBHA president. In other words, the only change I'm making is the name of the town manager and the appointment of David Neal as the Board of Adjustment member. Anyone having any discussion about that?
When you said number 2 would stay the same, Chris Nason, did we want to just make that, or would it be better to make it?
That's going to be Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's going to change too, though. We're going to have to have the same discussion in a few months anyways. It's okay. Keep it.
But it's easier to call him Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, it's fine. Put it off. It's fine.
Just put that off to December. When you get the new council, you can deal with that.
I think we have to make that decision.
I think we can make that decision tonight, just,
What's
Well,
our
you're going to
deadline?
have a new member on it.
We can put a new member at that
Well,
time.
I'll deal with it now when you can wait and have it all set.
We have to have that, what's the timeline on that? What's our timeline for that?
It needs to be done this month, the appointment.
Thank you.
so we name the position as opposed to the name. So if we put Mayor Pro Tem down,
That's what I would suggest.
we're not
Okay.
delaying anything.
So it
until
automatically
December.
goes to the next mayor. That's
Correct.
So I've got a motion on the floor to approve that. Did I get a second? Did you second that, Jim?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor of Reconstruction Task Force appointments as outlined here indicate by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Last item of business is public comment. Anyone else have public comment? Lauren Van Rippen, is that right? Hey, Lauren. Good evening.
I guess I'm coming to the party a little late. My name's Lauren Van Riper. I live on Hillcrest. I didn't know what was going on. I heard rumors about them trying to shut down Hickory, and kind of curious as to what's going on, and I'm all for having some kind of adaptive measures for the traffic, because Saturdays and Sundays, I can't leave my house, period. It is bumper to bumper, block traffic.
Right.
I have been hit twice by moving cars, getting my mail out of my mailbox. It's ridiculous, but shutting down Hickory I don't think is a plan, and I'm hoping it's not a plan, because it's going to impact fire department, response times, traffic, I mean, just daily life, getting my kids to school. I really don't think that's the proper thing. Do I have an idea? No. I'd love to know whatever this committee is. I'd love to be on it, because I'd like to see what the hell's going on. But, yeah, I don't know what's going on. And if there's something a little more transparent, having it on a website where it's a little more out in the open would be a whole lot more helpful.
Thank you. I think what's going on is a group of petitioners on Hickory Trail have asked the town to allow them to basically turn the street into a cul-de-sac, with the street being closed on the north end, or what I'll call the east end, where it intersects with Hillcrest. And that would, you hit the nail on the head with what you said about emergency vehicle response time. And I've taken the trouble to actually drive that route at the speed limit, being able to go up Hickory to Hillcrest and follow the intersection of Hickory around to Hillcrest again, and it's about a 2-minute difference in time. Just for me driving 25 miles an hour, it could be more than that depending on traffic, but that's a response time for an emergency vehicle, which I think is significant in this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, my husband's on Forestry. If he has calls, he can't leave. I'm on 2 different fire departments. I can't leave. I can't even make it out of my driveway.
Right.
Now, stupidly, I moved from Beechtree to Hillcrest, thinking it would be better for my family, and I've kind of regretted it, because I can't, Saturday morning, starts about 8 o'clock until 8 p.m.,
Right.
I'm literally not leaving my house. I
Right.
cannot. I pull out, people honk at me. I'm like, I'm trying to get my mail. It's awful.
Yeah,
So,
understood that. I'm not sure that closing Hillcrest is the answer to the problem, but I understand where you're coming from.
yeah.
Maybe contact
Thank
Mr.
you.
Carroll, because he's looking for members of his committee.
Oh, I'm going to be on it now.
Good.
Thank you. Al Urley? Good evening, Al.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Wes. Good luck. A couple of things came up tonight, so actually what I was going to start with is a little different. Due to Dorian and seeing all the damage that we have as far as trees down and debris on South Dogwood Trail, it came to my mind that, when talking with Joe Aniloff before this storm, right, that after the debris is cleaned up and we can take a look and get back to seeing what Dogwood Trail looks like, if there would be a possibility of some of the things that I brought up with him possibly being changed on the drawings. Because now some of the trees possibly are not going to be there. So there could be some maneuverability of the sidewalk. But then Wes turned around and said it was held off for some different design. Okay? So, if that could be integrated in possibly, and if they went out for bid, and the rest of this stuff is really questions, if they went out for bid, are the new plans and drawings available? That went out for bid with the changes. is there a new cost with the changes that hasn't been brought out to the public? Okay? Things like that. And then back to the whole scenario, which I brought up before, is that you've heard from a number of people up on Hillcrest about the traffic problem has grown. You know, I've lived on South Dogwood for 28 years now. Not lived there, I'm sorry, I owned the property, right? And it was always that the people on South Dogwood complained about the traffic. It's in the last 12 years or so when traffic has really started to build. Now it's no longer just South Dogwood. It's basically the whole town. It's up in the dunes, it's Hillcrest, it's Sea Oats, it's Hickory. It's everywhere. And to me, the dealing with the traffic right at this point now would be the way to go, even rather than the sidewalk. That actually the town seems to be doing it backwards. If we took care of the traffic, then we could turn around and look and see if we actually need to spend $1 million on a sidewalk. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Ann Swersma?
Ann Schertzma, 69 Hickory Trail. Good evening again. I'd like to respond to a couple things that came up in your discussion about non-conforming lots. First of all, Matt Neal has had all the information about the non-conforming lots in our town for how many months, Matt? Months and months. He's brought his paperwork to the planning board meetings. We've known for months that Seacrest Village is filled with non-conforming lots, that Skyline Road is, that Wax Myrtle is. They're everywhere. This is nothing new. I think Gary hit on it with the lack of planning by this board. And what this board tasked the planning board to do a year ago was to look at exceptions, not to look at the whole town and determine what the best way of going about this regulation would be, but to identify exceptions. Wes gave all this valuable information pursuant to Gary's request about the non-conforming lots. The information is there. Just needs to be consolidated, presented, set into some sort of a planning format. But Matt Neal has all you need and can do a PowerPoint presentation or something like that. I also would like to say about the traffic, I did sign the petition. I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere, and I think a number of us on Hickory Trail knew that because we are aware that if you block Hickory Trail, you create problems for the other roads in the dunes. But I think you can view it as an expression of frustration and a cry for help. This is the first I've heard that somebody has actually been hit while going to get her mail. Now, it's come close for me, but I'm very good at putting a hand out when I go to the mailbox. I find that just really appalling. And finally, I have to say, Mr. Connors, we live in a country that has a U.S. Constitution and a First Amendment, and you are a member of what is known as the state. And when you reach out to a constituent and you seek to suppress that constituent's speech, you are engaging in censorship. I'm entitled to my opinion, and I think it's absolutely wrong what you did to interrupt me and to assume what I was going to say. And I don't appreciate being mistreated like that by a member of my town council. I stand by the First Amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Norm St. Laurent? You're okay. Good evening, Norm.
My name is Norm St. Laurent, and I've been a resident of 63 Hickory Trail for 27 years. Mr. Mayor and council members, In response to a letter that I received from a council member, Jim Connors, I have responded to him with the following. Jim, thank you for your nice letter dated 11 August 2019. I am encouraged that there is some interest in resolving the traffic problems on Hickory Trail. This is not a new issue. I and 12 other residents surfaced this similar problem to the town about 15 years ago. In addition to the traffic snarls discussed at the meeting of the Town Council August 6, 2019, my chief concerns is that some pedestrian, a mom or dad walking their child or pet is going to get killed or seriously injured on Hickory Trail. All throughout the year, cars and trucks speed up and down Hickory Trail. Council members should address this issue now before there is a serious accident. I have personally observed 2 truck drivers, pickup drivers, racing down Hickory Trail. My kitchen window looks out at Hickory Trail, so when I'm getting a cup of coffee in the morning, I see this day in and day out. And this is not a big change of traffic patterns and everything else. It's to encourage enforcement of the law. Stop the darn speeding on Hickory Trail. See the attached documents referencing your oath of office. And please do your job to make sure that our outstanding police force enforces the law by making their presence on Hickory Trail present. Exceeding the speed limit has been an ongoing problem for many, many, many years. Attached is a paper on the importance of being an elected official, and in that paper, I referenced the town council management system was designated to combat corruption and unethical activity in government by promoting effective management within a transparent, responsive, and accountable structure. You are either our elected or appointed officials, and in that regard, you are accountable for providing policy or enforcing that policy for the safety of our citizens of Southern Shores. You are charged with enforcing the laws. The town, in a meeting, strategic planning meeting on February 16th, 2016, the town council is responsible for adopting all policy of the town. Policy should enhance, protect, and meet the needs of the town. I'm talking about needs of safety. I almost got hit. I mentioned in the previous meeting last month that came within that corner getting hit. I witnessed my mailbox being whacked by a truck going down Hickory Trail. Somebody's going to get killed. Somebody's going to be injured seriously, and I encourage you people to take our fine police force and have them start issuing tickets for speeders on Hickory Trail and make their presence felt there. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, Norm. This time I'll close public comment. I have no further business tonight, council. Have to add, anyone else have something they want to say? Let's start with Mr. Nason.
No comments.
Thank you. Gary? Fred?
Good job, Wes, during the storm. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And to the staff.
Thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, there's one thing I'd like to say, and that is, I was recently assigned to a committee working with Dare County and representatives from the other municipalities out here. And I don't have all the details yet, but this is obviously a statewide effort to increase participation in the 2020 census. Each year, $675 billion is allocated from the feds to the different states, and an accurate census count is critical to that. Now, I'll come up with some kind of statement to put out on a broadcast email about when the meeting schedules are and what the goals are, and basically what their goal is. But what the goal here in Dare County is to increase participation rates in all the communities out here in the Dare mainland. Now, for Southern Shores, that's going to be a tough job to do, to increase, because it looked like we already had 88% participation rate in the census. So we've done very good. But I just wanted to bring up, there's going to be some discussions about that within our community, the other towns and everything, and I'll try and relay that back through our broadcast emails and everything. But suffice it to say, if you get a census form, please fill it out. Send it back. It's the only thing I had, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jim. I would add one comment. Since the storm, the control group has met in person 4 different times. The control group, by the way, is all the town's mayors and the chairman of the county board, county manager, Park Service. There's about 12 or 14 of us, the sheriff. And most of the Outer Banks is open for business, except for the south end of Hatteras Island, which is Frisco and Hatteras Village itself. They may not get open for business as far as tourists and visitors until after the weekend, or at the earliest at this weekend. There's just too many homes that aren't ready to be occupied. Overall, the storm damage, when you get out of Southern Shores, except for Hatteras and Okokok, was not too bad. Most of the towns did not suffer anywhere near the tree loss and the damage to their properties that we suffered. A big difference. And I'm having a hard time convincing the county to hurry up and accelerate the recovery process because of that. They don't see the whole county as being hit as hard as we were, unless you go to Hatteras or Frisco. That's all I have. This time I'll need a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Any opposed to adjourning? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.